great to have you with us. So Knud is the CEO of IoT Analytics, has been more than a decade analyzing the market, and IoT Analytics itself as a company is very focused in this market, and especially on the industrial side. So it's a great pleasure to have you and walk through us your views about the market, and little comments also about the COVID-19 impact now and later.
Thank you very much, Teppo. I appreciate the kind intro, and good morning and hello everyone. Sorry for the quick audio there. I have started sharing my screen. I hope you guys can see that. I will disable my camera right now so you have it on a bigger screen, which hopefully you can see now.
Yes, we can see.
Great, very good. Since I'm the first one, it's a little bit we have to check if everything is working fine or not. Before we get started, I quickly want to introduce what we do at IoT Analytics. We are a market research firm for everything Internet of Things and Industry 4.0. We have been on the market for about 6 years right now, and we publish a lot of reports on different topics. Recently, security market report, equipment as a service, and we kind of look at IoT from four mainstreams, which is software and platforms, industrial, smart city, and connectivity. Those are kind of our main focus areas. And today I want to talk a little bit about where we are with COVID, how this is impacting IoT, and present to you some of the research that we've done in the last month, essentially, on where things are heading from here. And I want to start with where we are in IoT today, because I think it's important to realize that IoT has actually matured quite a bit over the last year. So when I started looking into making a business out of IoT research and insights, we were in 2014, and IoT wasn't really a big thing then. And if you just look at the Google Trend charts here, you see that over the course of, and Google Trends is obviously an indicator of public interest, who searches for IoT on the internet. There was a massive rise between 2013 and 2017, and then it's been stabilized, even though stabilization doesn't necessarily mean that the market hasn't evolved further. It's just that the public has then taken notes. And I think there is a bunch of trends, and I've listed 10 here, there's more, that have really helped in maturing IoT solutions. So in the early days, we had device management platforms. This was largely driven from cellular providers such as Sierra Wireless, Telet. They started to have, but also from the Ericssons of this world and other device management, so you can manage your devices in large scales remotely. I think in the 2014-15 timeframe, the topic of application enablement platforms, so that you're actually really enabling your developers to develop on these platforms, became bigger. Companies like ThingWorx popped up, and in that case, bought by PTC, made it fairly big. In 2015, the cloud companies were starting to see the opportunity. So AWS IoT in 2015 was essentially the first of the big cloud companies that jumped on the IoT bandwagon. And that was also roughly the time frame when we started to see the emergence of low power connectivity standards, such as what Wirepas is enabling, but also others like the LoRa Alliance, NB-IoT. Those came about in roughly in those days. We've since seen things like more scalable AI and ML tools, also even going into deep learning and other things that were have been there for a while, but we're not being able to use them on a basis of scalability. The topic of digital twins, having kind of end-to-end view on how do you model the data and how do you get different types of virtual models to talk to each other. The containerization and perhaps even more nowadays, functionalization of software. We are now seeing way more powerful edge computing architectures on all types, levels of the edge, be it on the server edge all the way down to the sensor edge. In 2018, we've seen that the cloud players all bought some smaller real-time operating system players, because that integration from real-time operating system and cloud is quite powerful for them, and we're seeing the big players kind of coming down the stack as well. And now we're talking about things like low latency wireless. 5G is obviously a topic, but it's not only 5G. I mean, also Wi-Fi 6 and other things are really changing the game. So if you look at those developments, and those are just some, in the early days, and I have something from Bain and Company here on the left-hand side. In the early days, people were not, I say early days, I think some of you have been in this business for 20 years and argue that IoT is just kind of an evolution from M to M and other things. But if you look at 2016, a lot of people said unclear ROI of IoT solutions is one of the top barriers. And this is reduced. So Bain did the survey again in 2018, and you can see it's pretty much the biggest of the reductions of the on this chart. We've done our own research as well, and we did one on Industry 4.0, so kind of on the industrial side of things, companies, adopters, and they said that 80% or 78% cited a positive return on investment on technologies that are related to Industry 4.0 and also to IoT. So the topic of ROI and ROI can obviously be, there's different subcomponents. One is certainly that things are becoming cheaper. And this different technologies that I just showed you on the previous page have really led to making it cheaper, making it quicker for implementing it, making it easier to start implementing it. And I think that's what we're seeing now. And I think this is a really positive development for IoT. There's obviously many more things that could still be changed. IoT is still not plug and play in many cases, but we've come a long way. And if you look at some of the examples of things that I would say, if you look at this chart in the last 7 years from 2013 to now, that I would almost argue they were unthinkable in 2013. So think of a company like iRobot. Some of you, I would assume, have a wireless vacuum cleaner in the house. I actually own an iRobot. And if you look behind it, this is actually quite state-of-the-art architecture. So they are using a serverless IoT cloud architecture, which essentially means they're using AWS IoT and some AWS Lambda functions. And with that, they're going essentially beyond containerization of software. They're going as functions as a service. And iRobot says they need less than 10 employees to handle the millions of devices they have in the field and to manage the operations, which I think is really outstanding from an architecture point of view. We all know that Tesla is very innovative and is doing a lot of things, but even in the car industry, I think Tesla has wowed a few people, and the ability to perform over-the-air software updates on now more than 1 million cars that they have on the roads. And there was an article, or there was something going around the media 2 or 3 years ago, where Tesla was reported to have a pretty bad brake system, and Teslas weren't braking. Other cars were essentially outperforming Teslas on some brake tests. And then just overnight, they updated all of their cars, and all of a sudden, the brake on the Teslas was working fine, just like some of their competing cars. And this kind of ability was unseen of at that point in time. I have the example of Havsund in here, which is a utility, and they are rolling out 700,000 smart electricity meters, and that in a single mesh network, which is a huge mesh network. And some of you may know that Wirepas is actually behind this. But again, this is something that was unheard of before. And then the last example is an example from the machinery industry, where a company like Heidelberger Druck, they make machines for printing machines, they've really gone beyond, and since they've connected all their machines in an IoT fashion, they are now going to charging clients not by a one-off and say, hey, you buy the machine for, let's say, €500,000. You are actually paying by whatever you're printing on the machine, so by printed sheet or something like that. And so it's a pay per outcome. and they've been innovating with that for the last year or two. And it's really interesting to see this kind of equipment as a service and pay-per-outcome model happening. And these are all examples of IoT and how far we've come, which is really interesting. Now, if you look at those examples, they were driving, among others, there's many more projects, what we see as the IoT market. So very steady and strong growth. And now this guy came along here. We all know what's been happening. And the question is, what's happening going forward in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term? Let's take a step back and just look at where we are with COVID. I'm not here to tell you, I'm not a COVID expert, but I'm in the business of market research. So I obviously also look at what happens with COVID. So at this point, we have about 7 million cases. 400 people have died from this. You have countries like Brazil and India, in which the cases are really going up right now. So this is by no means behind us. If you actually look in terms of absolute numbers of new infections, I think the numbers are among the highest that are added every day right now. You also see that Europe and the US, even though it seems like the US, it sounds in the media sometimes the US has done a worse job in dealing with COVID, but Europe as a whole actually is on the curve, hasn't done a better job. So this is not behind us. We also don't know if there's a second wave coming, but it definitely has created a structural damage to our economies. If you look at it on a very high level, just look at the GDP that we've seen in the last year. It's been extremely, from the point of view of the 2020, it's been extremely constant over about 9 years. We've had this long upcycle with obviously China, the one here, driving a large portion of the global GDP. So now the forecast is for, and this is the latest from the World Bank from this week, is of -5% for the year. You see the unemployment rate, particularly in the US, has shot up to record levels. Inflation is on the way down. Actually saw that China today published consumer producers of -3% for the month of June. And obviously business confidence, although you can see in China it's already gone back up, but business confidence is on the way down. So all of these are clear indications that this is something that is structurally damaging our economies right now. If you then look at some of the tech and IoT topics, and I'm just giving you some anecdotal quotes from people that we have seen or talked to. So in the short term, you hear people say, hey, budgets are frozen. Yeah, sometimes they say except for budgets in automation or except for a specific budget, but generally speaking, the short-term budgets are frozen. I talked to Tepo, for example, as well. I mean, the IoT devices that are up, they're running, they haven't been disrupted, and this is a great thing. I mean, this is actually IoT plays a very big role in making sure that we're able to connect to our assets. But obviously, if you can't travel, if you have specific restrictions, there has to be a softer Q2, Q3 because you just can't roll out, and that is in spite of the demand drop that some of the companies are seeing or have been seeing. There are some short-term difficulties. But if you then take the view of what will happen once this is over, I think this is where most people are asking themselves, what's happening? What's the next thing? I think all the evidence of the people we talk to is IoT actually gets prioritized, and IoT among other digital topics. Here, just a few comments on the right-hand side. The CIO of a German manufacturer of compressors said, hey, we have two priorities right now in terms of projects. One is we have a project going on connecting with our customers through cloud-enabled solutions. And the other one is connect with our compressors through IoT. So that's clearly stating, hey, IoT is one of our top two priorities right now. Same for Daniel Brandt, he's the engineering director for Sandvik. He's saying, look, I've been working in digitization in this company for a long time. And now everybody's coming and asking me what the next step is. And we are now accelerating things like automation and worker augmentation in the short run, but really have more interest. And this is mirrored by other people who are saying, look, our customers are telling us digitization now gets prioritized. What we've done at IoT Analytics, we have mapped kind of the different themes. This is, hopefully it's not too small for you on your screen. We've mapped 25 individual effects for our IoT in the coming month and years based on the different discussions, data points that we have. And there's some very interesting things of things that are really being accelerated, and also some that are negatively affecting the IoT. And I don't have the time right now to go into depth of all of this, and I maybe want to also leave this up for Q&A if you have some questions at the end. I want to highlight 6 of them in detail because I think they are interesting to discuss and interesting from the point of view of you as Wirepas conference attendants. The first one is about processes becoming more automated. I think you also already saw that in some of the quotes that I showed earlier. Automation is one of the things is key. And I have a quote here from actually someone who's more on the academic side that says economic literature has shown that investments in automation are made during a crisis. And a lot of other people are saying, hey, our customers are asking us, how can we automate? And automate can obviously be physical automation, so in terms of robots, processes, but it's not only about physical automation. It's also obviously about software-based automation, everything that happens in the back end. And so the examples why this quote might be more physical automation. Automation is on all ends is key. And automation may not be so bad after all, because automation has really been, I mean, if you look at before the crisis, how many people have said automation is going to kill our jobs and it's really a bad thing. And all of a sudden companies are saying, well, maybe it's not so bad after all. It helps us during a crisis like COVID. And if the second wave does come, we want to be better prepared. The second thing, and I think it's really interesting, is supply chains and also manufacturing capacity become more flexible. So people have seen, hey, they're relying on one supplier. I mean, in general, if you look at the data, most major companies have had disruptions in their supply chains during COVID, and there has been a focus on having very efficient supply chains, and now it's maybe more about making it a bit more flexible. So it's looking at multiple suppliers, looking at multiple supply locations. Companies are rethinking some of that now, and wondering if it was too risky for them to rely only on one or very few sources. So that's on the supply chain. The same kind of applies on the manufacturing capacity. We believe that CapEx to OpEx will be a theme. So instead of spending a lot on one or big machine, and we saw that example of Heidelberger Druck, who are kind of also moving to this pay per outcome. Companies maybe want to be a little bit less in terms of spending a lot on big piece of equipment, and rather have it as an operating expense rather than a capital expenditure. So we actually had a survey in Q4 2019 before the crisis, where we asked manufacturers, are you interested or likely to, or would you prefer to procure equipment as a service or leasing it instead of keeping it on your balance sheet as a capex? And we were quite surprised that over half of the respondents of major manufacturers said, yes, we would actually really prefer moving some of our capex to OpEx. And I think this is something that after COVID, again, will be, people will think about it and will reprioritize. One thing that is not talked about so much, we believe, but I mean, we've seen clear evidence of that, is what we call the digital divide widens. And what we mean with that is COVID is leading for some companies to lay off people or to stop some important projects, while others are continuing and saying this is strategic. Digitization is strategic. So from our point of view, if you then look forward in the next 3-4 years, you will have this gap in 2019 where some companies accelerated and some stopped or decelerated, and it will lead to a difference between the leaders and the laggards when it comes to adopting digitization. And so just one example we talked to one company, they've essentially laid off their whole digitization team because the company felt this was not really the right thing in the current crisis. And another company we talked to say, hey, we're actually accelerating that. And I think this in the end will lead to if digitization really moves the needle in some industries, which I believe it will, then we will see a digital divide between those companies that now accelerated it and those that decelerated it. I'm speeding up slightly because I want to leave a couple of minutes for Q&A. Remote asset access becomes important. So what Zoom is to video conference is what remote asset access is to kind of things and IoT. People wanted to connect. Now people also want to connect to their assets and want to make sure they kind of have a view on what's going on. And so remote access in whatever form that is, and IoT obviously is by definition a way to remotely access, but even within IoT, there's different tools you can use, is one of those things that companies are looking at in the crisis, but also beyond the crisis, because they want to be prepared next time. Talked about supply chain flexibility. I think the other big supply chain thing is track and trace. So talking to, like, just an example here of a company, Vessel Tracker, they track ships in the world. They've seen that that their customers have used their tool more extensively during this time and really need a better visibility. I just talked the other day to a Japanese manufacturer of hardware for positioning tracking, and they are saying their hardware is booming right now. People need modules for the positioning GPS type track and trace solutions that they're building right now. I also know of other companies that have prioritized topics like this. Last thing, security. And this is interesting, kind of a question, how did this all come about? But I think the whole Zoom discussion is not secure. We're remote, new security vulnerabilities with everybody working from home. Security is all of a sudden in the spotlight. Everybody is kind of questioning what's my security setup. And some of the experts that we've talked to say that they believe this may actually lead to new security regulations, which in turn will lead to a new boost in the whole security technology and the companies offering security solutions. So just as a quick summary, IoT has matured. The ROI of IoT solution has gone up in our view. The market has grown strongly in the last years, and COVID is now putting a question mark on it. When we look at it deeper, and despite some of the short-term difficulty, the data is pointing to a reprioritization of digital initiatives, including IoT. And so some of the themes with the highest tractions that we're seeing are process automation, supply chain and manufacturing flexibilization, remote asset access, track and trace, and security. And with that, we have 3 minutes left for Q&A. If you have any questions, you can also, obviously, I still have some 20-minute slots here in this deal room tool that you can book with me if you would like to discuss or have any ideas. I'm free today.
Thank you, Knut. Very interesting insights. I have a one question here that, and I also have seen it in your previous reports, that one of the points hindering the progress of IoT is really the access to right talents in capacity and in knowledge. What do you think? What are the solutions and what could be the trends helping that situation? Because it's quite understandable. IoT is a very diverse market, and when there is a need for many different solutions, that's an understandable bottleneck. But what do you think would help there?
Yeah, so I didn't highlight that today, but I think that the data we've seen throughout all of 2019 and before is exactly what you're saying. Currently, in our view, at least, I showed the Bain data, which puts security first. But in our view, the biggest thing is actually people are not getting access to talent. So first of all, I think to a certain degree, the crisis is helping that problem because there's more talent becoming available as companies are doing a hiring freeze or are in some cases even laying off. I think there's one of the trends that I'm excited about is the trend about low code, no code you're seeing a lot more solutions that are there to make it easy for the people who are not necessarily the hardcore developers to develop solutions. And similar to what you've seen in, like, for example, website development with tools like WordPress. Like, if you wanted to build a website 10 years ago, it was difficult. Now it's pretty easy. So I think that, and technically, I mean, all the modularization and platformization of IoT. I think if you look at, when I talk to somebody who, I know a company, for example, 2013, they built an IoT solution. They really had a hard time doing this. They had to think through so many things that nowadays the platforms are managing already. So
I fully agree. I also believe that the platforms are helping, and that's basically the third investment. It's just that the platforms need to be flexible and versatile to have a multiple use.